Welcome back to Copper Star Precision, the channel dedicated to getting you more points at your competitive shooting matches. Today we're talking about red dots. Actually, in fact, this is a green dot. We're going to also talk about the differences between red and green, why you might want to have one on your precision rifle. Chances are you don't need one, and your time and money will be better spent elsewhere. However, if you are going to go with one, I decided to go with the Holosun 507 Comp, and I'll tell you why right after this. So, I will be the first one to admit the money that you spend getting this on your rifle scope is much better spent on ammunition, on range time, everything to help you improve your natural point of aim. It is not a substitute, and in fact, if you're earlier on in your shooting career, it's going to end up being a crutch that's going to help you develop bad habits, which you do not want to do. So, honestly, unless you're further along and you see a use for this, I highly advise against doing this because you're going to end up, like I said, using it as a crutch. When I talk about natural point of aim, we identify different landmarks or little features in the terrain where the targets are, and we want to set ourselves up for success by coming in square to the target that we're engaging, putting the bag down, putting the rifle down, getting everything lined up. You can almost follow, as you put the rifle down, you can follow the barrel to the target, and then when you get into glass, the target should be right there. Newer shooters, that's why I recommend always running lower magnifications than you think you need, because you're going to get a wider field of view, and the chances are of that target being in your scope as you look through it the first time is going to be much higher than running higher magnification when you're just starting out. As your natural point of aim improves, that's when you can dial up the magnification. The benefits of higher magnification are obviously being able to get a little bit more resolution, a little bit more clarity. The target is larger. You can delineate stadia on your reticle a little bit more easily at higher magnifications, and it makes it much better for corrections. If you have an impact, you might be able to, at a higher magnification, to see which side of the plate you hit, versus at a lower magnification you just see the plate move. So being able to call your shots, see your misses, make corrections off of those is extremely important, which is why you see some of the higher end shooters definitely running those higher magnification ranges. But then again, you lose that field of view. So I like to run higher magnifications. I feel like my natural point of aim is developed over the years to the point where I feel pretty confident running at about 20 power, when I suggest people just starting out, are in that 12 to 15 power range. But doing so closes my field of view and sometimes makes target acquisition difficult. It's not a substitute for developing those natural point of aim skills. It's almost like an emergency, oh crap, I'm on the clock, I can't find the target. Your options are I can zoom out, find the target, zoom back in, which burns time, or with the special design of the reticle in this specific green dot, it's going to be able to come off the scope really quick, find that landmark, put the reticle of the red dot, or green dot in this case, on that, come back, and the target is always there. Why is it always there? Because of the multiple reticle system within this red dot. So a lot of people, of course it looks tactical to have a red dot on your rifle and you're like some sort of operator. Generally speaking, the offset 45 red dots are for close quarters engagements. You have some ACOG or something basically zeroed in for longer distance shots, and if you have some sort of CQB, you can then cant the rifle 45 degrees, look at the red dot for close engagements. What we're using it for here is a little bit different. And the way I use this is the MultiReticle System has a couple different options. Most red dots are going to give you like a 2, 3, maybe a 6 MOA dot. That's not really big enough for the distances that we're shooting. It's too fine a point to concentrate on. What's nice about this is that you can cycle through options of the reticle. There is a 2 MOA dot in here, but there's also an option for a 32 MOA ring. And it's that 32 MOA ring that I use in combination with the little center dot that helps make a big sight picture and gets me in the general area. So like I said, I run higher magnification, so I'm running 21 power on this scope, and the reticle of this scope basically has on the windage stadia 8 mils on either side, so I have 16 total mils. Well, 16 total mils of field of view is equivalent to about 55 MOA. The ring inside the red dot is 32 MOA. So that means if I'm in a panic situation and my natural point of aim has not gotten me on target, I can basically point this towards the direction of the target, and if I can, kind of use the landmarks or whatever and I find the target in that 32 MOA dot, I basically have 55 MOA in my field of view. So if it's in that dot, chances are when I come down onto the scope itself, the target is within the field of view of my scope, because my field of view in here is larger than this. Now, if you're trying to pinpoint a target on a 2 or 3 MOA dot, I mean, yeah, you're going to be right on it, but it's going to take you a lot longer to find that target on a really, really tiny dot out there. But if you're within that ring, chances are when you come down into glass, it's going to be within your field of view. So again, I don't use it as a primary source for locating targets. I trust my natural point of aim, try and develop and work on those skills. It's almost a measure of last resort. I could also obviously decrease the magnification, but if I'm in a nice stable position and I've built everything and I have some support hand either on top of the scope, in the bag, grabbing the bag, and I feel like I'm in a really stable position, moving this hand can simply break that position, change the magnification, and then now I'm like, okay, I've lost my stability. So instead I can just peek my head up, make an adjustment to the rifle, and I'm right back in. So for me, having practice with this system, it is faster. Now, running at 45 on either side or straight up and down like I have here, that's more personal preference. The disadvantage of this, specifically on NRL 22 stages, is if I don't work on my natural point of aim, if I'm going into like a porthole, or especially the NRL 22 pyramid has 2x4s running this way. So with my bag and rifle on that 2x4, the second 2x4 of the rung above it is actually blocking the red dot or green dot completely. So I can't even use it to find the target. So I need to definitely have those natural point of aim fundamentals built in to my training regimen. I run a green dot because here in Arizona it's kind of like the desert and basically like looks like the planet Mars, so it has a little bit higher contrast against the desert landscapes, and I've even found it to work well against more lush green landscapes. If red dots are your preference, that's your preference, but I feel like it provides a better contrast for my eyes to use a green dot. But the fact that this has a multi-reticle system, has a nice big circle that almost looks like the reticle from like an EOTech, and basically allows me a big area to kind of center in on, so I'm not trying to pinpoint that really tiny dot. It also makes it faster to find the dot. The way I have it set up now, it's pretty easy, but it's a nice big green circle, and then if my target is within that circle, chances are, most of the time it's going to be within the field of view of my scope. Again, this is not a primary source of locating targets. It's only for those emergency situations where I'm having a real tough time. I don't want to break my position, change my magnification, zoom out, zoom back in, rebuild the position, that kind of thing. It can save you some time if you practice with it. But again, if you're newer in your shooting journey or even an experienced person, probably working on your natural point of aim, spending that money on ammunition and range time is probably a better use of your money. I will also take a second to explain kind of the Frankenstein thing I have going on here. With the Discovery Optics scope, the turrets are absolutely massive and they're super tall. So I wanted to make sure that the entire window of the red dot, green dot is above the turret. And so in order to do that, I needed some risers. So the way I'm attaching this to the scope is by first use of 34mm rings that have a Picatinny section underneath it, and then a lower 1/3 co-witness RMR mount. The Holosun 507 uses the RMR footprint, and then the extra space of the actual emitter body before the window gets me a perfect height. So if you are using this scope, or if you have a different scope, what I would do is I would measure from the scope tube itself to the top of the turret. In this case, it is 1.66 inches, and then I will put links for this in the description for these two parts here. You can use those Amazon links to basically come up with creative solutions for what you need after you find out the heights that you need. So I forget what the heights on these are, but they usually give you a dimension from the split in the scope rings to the base of the Picatinny rail. So that's going to be one thing you can add to the height. The lower 1/3 co-witness is usually 0.95 inches from Picatinny base to the footprint, and then this specific model of red dot, just to give you an idea, is about 0.37 inches from the base to where the window starts to get over this little emitter part here. So you can come up with some math, kind of calculate, so you're not mixing and matching parts and trying to all kinds of configurations. This configuration works really well for me. Again, links for those will be in the description. There will also be a link if you want to purchase this green dot. This is the Ronin edition. Like I said, it has the MultiReticle System, and it's really worked out for me in those emergency situations where I've needed it. The last thing I want to address is how do you actually set this up so that it's useful? Well, that's going to involve taking this to the range, finding a target that is easy to focus on. So I just set up a 3-inch steel plate, which is about 3 MOA at 100 yards. There's a 2 MOA dot in here in the center, remember. So I set up a 3-inch plate or a 2-inch plate at 100 yards. I set up my rifle, and here's the most important part. I'm going to dial my dope, data on previous engagement, to 1.8 mils as my typical dope between 1.7 and 1.8 when I'm zeroed at 50 yards with this rimfire rifle. I'm going to get in a nice stable position with a bipod or even a shooting rest or anything like that, and I'm going to make sure the bag is completely solid and rock solid, pointing directly at the center of that target. And then I'm going to adjust, once the rifle is completely steady without moving the rifle at all, I'm going to adjust the red dot, so that, or green dot in this case, so that it is that 2 MOA dot is right on that 100-yard target. And that's going to basically center zero. It's going to zero this green dot to 100 yards. Why don't I have it zeroed at 50 yards? Well, because typically while we do zero the rifle scope at 50 yards, the engagements for longer range shots are going to be, 75 to 300 yards. So you pick a distance in between there. In my case, I picked 100 because I had an easy access to a 100-yard range. I might even zero at 125, 150 if you participate in a lot of PRS rimfire matches or NRL 22X matches that go out and stretch those distances. Basically pick the median distance that you think will be engaging. So maybe for center fire, that might be 500 or 600 yards, and zero there, right? So if you're engaging targets between 300 and 800 yards, maybe a 500 or 600 yard zero for this is going to cover you, so that no matter where you're dialing, where your scope is set up, where your scope is zeroed, usually 50 yards for rimfire, 100 yards for center fire, this is going to cover you for most targets, because they're never going to line up except for when you're dialed to 100 and if this is zeroed at 100. So you would never take a shot using just this when you have a nice powerful optic behind you. Just know that they're not going to line up, but the fact that this has that giant 32 MOA ring makes that much more tolerable, in the fact that if the ring encompasses the target, chances are, like I said, depending on your magnification, when you look through the scope, that target will also be in the scope. So I hope that was informative. Again, not something you typically need, and it's no substitute for developing your natural point of aim, but if you are wondering and curious about why this is on the rifle, how people use it in the precision rifle sports, or anything like that, hopefully this explains some of that, and explains some of the decisions I made and thought about when going with this and this little Frankenstein stack of things to get the green dot in the position that it is in. Questions and comments, as always, leave them down below. While you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel with notifications enabled. And yeah, until I see you next time, as always, score more points, but work on that natural point of aim.